We'll start in a minute, not in a minute, less than a minute.
I don't know how to.
Sir, you are host now. Hello.
Firoz. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you very much. In fact, the topic that we are going to be doing today is a very interesting topic, firmly within the sociological bandwagon. Are you able to see my slide and hear my voice? Guys, are you able to see my slide and hear my voice?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Just a sec, please. Sorry, guys.
Sir, unable to hear your voice.
Because I was muted. Now I am there.
Okay. Okay, sir.
Okay. So today we are going to do this topic on family, marriage, and kinship. And it is a very interesting thing that one of the biggest migration which happens in a country like India happens to be in the institution of marriage. And why it happens is the fact that because the society is where the girls after getting married travel and stay in the husband's family. There are all these girls who marry and migrate to the husband's family, whether it is internal in the country or external, which goes out of the country. And as we have been talking in the last few minutes, we talked about the fact that whenever a person migrates, it's not just a body which moves, it's an identity, it's a culture, it's a value. There are all these paraphernalias which move around along with the human being. And think about the fact that there is the largest case of migration happens in the institution, which is so firmly rooted in the whole. See, the difference between the Indian and the Western concept is possibly the fact that in the West, after the boy and the girl marry, they set up their own house. They don't stay with either one's parents majoritarily. Whereas in India, the largest predominant case is the girl relocates to the husband's house. And think about the fact she has an identity, she has a cultural identity, she has a religious identity, she has, various identities. And now she moves into another household where there's another identity at play. Absolutely. So Jyoti, again, the point is girls are marrying and moving, and we never looked at it in terms of migration. So before I start, first and foremost, last time Gurpreet was talking about sports. Gurpreet, you mentioned about sports and cultural integration. So actually, I saw there were a lot of articles. There's a lot of research in terms of a culturalization through sports. The only point is all these things are grouped under sports and exercise psychology. So a lot of these articles that I found were more into psychological, European psychologists, interactive role of sports in multicultural society. When we talked about multiculturalism, Gurpreet had brought out the question of sports and multiculturalism. But most of the articles that I found out of research that I found out, and I didn't dig too much deeper. I did more of a peripheral study. They were more, bunched under psychology. So I thought, let me just put it in front of you. So let's quickly do the topic as of today. Marriage and kinship in diaspora, marriage and kinship. And marriage kinship families are a thoroughly rooted sociological topic. But as I have been telling you, migration and diaspora studies is a very interdisciplinary topic. And when I talk about interdisciplinary, it does not mean that we are looking at, A subject, B subject, and C subject. We are looking at any aspect of the migration and diaspora subject from different topics, how it works in terms of psychology, how it works in terms of sociology, how it works in terms of anthropology, how it works in terms of religious studies. So that is interdisciplinary. Kinship in network spaces. When people migrate and settle, they do not just physically leave, longing for home. So again, coming back, and I keep coming back to the concept of the girl migrating from her homeland to a hostland. The house itself is homeland, and she migrates to a hostland in a new culture. And then there is a longing for home, maintaining connection with the one left behind. So look at this in a microcosm. In fact, a lot of people who have joined knew when I started, discussing migration and diaspora last year. In many units, I took the example of marriage because marriage becomes a very interesting, microcosm to the larger aspect of migration and diaspora. Encyclopedia defines family as a group of people united by marriage, blood, adoption, single household interacting with each other, irrespective of social position. Marriage characteristics of family defines marriage as a socially sanctioned relationship between a man and woman. More often than not, the institution of marriage basically evolved in the human society as humans became civilized. They settled down to ensure the legitimacy of the children born out of a union. See, inevitably, the family works in the way that the offspring is taken care of, nurtured, and protected. So, what's that? Slide not moving. Okay, hang on. Let me start again. Sorry, let me start again. Are the slides moving now? Are the slides moving now?
Yes, sir. No, the slides are moving.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, nobody gave me a feedback, so I didn't know. So, Gurpreet, this is what I was telling you about sports and acculturation. This was falling under the domain of psychology.
Right, sir. Right, sir.
Okay, so
Thank you.
these were the two I quickly found out. So if you do a little Google search or Google Scholar, you'll find some more things. This is our objectives in terms of marriage, kinship, and diaspora. What we talked about when people migrate, they do not just physically leave. Encyclopedia defines family as a group of people united by marriage. Marriage is characterized of the family, basically in terms of legitimacy of the children born, but more often than not, the whole institution is to protect and nurture the offspring. Remember, the whole living ecosystem works in terms of procreation, of moving forward. And that's how has human beings evolved. Societies became civilized. All these institutions came about. Marital relations are important part of kinship. World over, essentially, if you saw Europe and the wars that they fought, the World War One and the World War Two, more often than not, each state was governed by people of the same kinship group. That was a political struggle. But if you see Indian history, marriages were always taken to enhance, and it is happening today also. Marriages happen to enhance a business empire. Marriages are done to enhance a political empire. There is this concept of kinship which comes in, a socially recognized relationship between people in a culture who are held to be biologically related or given the status of relatives by marriage, adoption, or other rituals. Idea is to spread the, either the empire or spread the network or so and so forth. marriage, family, and kinship are the concepts that characterize the social system of most societies. In India, we see in fact, in Oriental, we see it in a particularly different light. Because if we see Indian history also, remember the time the Mughals typically had marriage alliances with the Rajputs, which then became a political force. So across the world, it is done certain way that leads to the migration of, and then two types of society, patrilineal and matrilineal. In patrilineal, it is women in patrilineal which move. In matrilineal, it's men which move. The whole descent in patrilineal is through the father. In matrilineal, the descent is through the mother. So in patrilineal, the eldest son becomes the heir. In matrilineal, the eldest daughter becomes the heir. Heir or descent moves to the male line, matrilineal moves to the female line. When women moves to the husband's household, it is known as patrilocal. If husband moves, it is called matrilocal. Again, you see how the normative features of it is defined. The media, the movies, popular culture, आदमी रोते नहीं है, men do not cry, men do not move into the women's house. These concepts are typically socialization is happening through media, that this is how it is done, and anything that you do besides this is wrong, or it's not correct, or it is not as per norms. So the patrilineal, matrilineal, patrilocal, most in Northwest are traditional patrilineal. Communities like Nayars of South India and Garo Khasis in Northeastern are practicing matrilineal. Each has its advantages, disadvantages. Let's not go into it because then we'll go into hardcore sociology. Also seeks for territorial exogamy and caste endogamy. Essentially, if there is a girl or boy in the village, they cannot marry. A girl from a village has to marry to another village. A boy has to marry into another village. Uh, uh, People maintain some sort of a caste endogamy. There is still, if you pick up a newspaper, matrimonials, or if you even take a matrimonial website, they are categorized based on caste. And we have also seen in the caste unit that caste, overcome religion. So irrespective of various religions in India, the caste factor goes along because a lot of conversion happened and the caste carried on. Marriage has to be from the same caste endogamy, despite the practice of territorial and clan endogamy. And then there are these gotras. There are some some communities which you cannot marry within the gotra, or you have to marry within the gotra. There are some communities in southern India, as well as Muslims who for whom first cousin is the best way of marriage, or they marry within the same family. So there are different communities practicing different way to marry. Within the system, women are expected to be more inclined towards norms and practices. That's why most religions or most rituals are performed by women in a conjugal family, then in a natal family. In other words, the woman becomes a permanent migrant, not just by physical moving, but also by accepting the conjugal family's way of life. A, a quintessential case of migration and diaspora. Only thing is, we are when we talk about a marriage, we are talking about a single woman. So we do not categorize, we do not look at it from a migration lens or a diasporic lens. We only look at a diasporic lens when people, move national boundaries. We look at migration when they move, when they are migrating within the national boundaries or outside. But we do not look at marriage as migration, or, we do not look at it from a diasporic lens. Marriage of Indian women to non-resident Indians or Indian diasporic community, also a phenomena can be located within the same framework. The holders of tradition, a wife is both educated to adjust with Western world, as well as normative to pass on the tradition. And inevitably, it is almost expected as a woman's job to pass on the culture. If there is anybody who has newly joined in the class, let me just break for a minute. And the rules for the class are very simple. At any moment of time, you think there is something that you wish to value add, or there's a question that you need to ask, please stop me by interrupting or raising a hand or putting it in the chat mode. Everybody is free to contribute whatever information or knowledge they have, because the idea is of different, but and the concept of academics and scholarly pursuit is perspectives. We do not talk about right and wrong, good or bad, correct, incorrect. We talk about perspectives. More often than not, whenever I define something, I define it from the place where the definition has come from, or the scholar who has given a definition. Remember, in academics, as in any other field, it's all subjective. People are biased, so we will give names so that you know who's giving what perspective. Okay. Marrying a spouse living abroad can enhance the status. In the 80s and the 90s, it was a big deal. Interestingly, it is still a big deal. In the 80s, before the economic liberalization of Manmohan Singh, getting things from abroad was a major status symbol in middle class families. Coming from abroad was a major status symbol. In the 90s, when the liberalization happened, a lot of these, foreign philic, awe came down. Yet we see in marriages today, it's a social, enhancement or a social status. Further, it widens the transnational networks for fostering more migration. And theorists argue that diaspora is a condition not just developed out of human movement, but also interwoven with cultural shifts, both in modern and postmodern worlds. So, because more often than not, one needs to understand when people move, they move along with their culture, they move along with their identity. And we, human beings have this habit of forming roots. The roots are where you stay, you get acclimatized to the culture around, to people around, to the. So today, for example, a lot of people do not find potholes on the road as something out of the ordinary. But when they go abroad and they see a different ecosystem, then they say, hey, but our roads can also be better. You get acclimatized to a certain thing. You get acclimatized to pollution. You get acclimatized to noise. And then there is a cultural shock. Diaspora journeys are not about traveling and also putting down their roots, are about traveling and also putting down their roots. It's about arriving at a new place, settling down, and longing for elsewhere or in another place. More often than not, because you have gone through a particular culture over a period of time. It's something like this. Today, if I was taken out or uprooted from my current place and put in a place, possibly in the US, where there is much more silence and much less density of people, I will, feel out of place because I am, woken in the middle of the night by honking. I am woken in the morning by, various noises. Possibly, it will be in fact, there is a very interesting movie of Kamal Hassan, a silent movie, Pushpak, if I'm not wrong, where this guy stays in a chawl, and then he gets an opportunity to stay in a five-star and he can't sleep. So he comes back to his chawl in Mumbai and records the sound all around and takes it to the hotel and plays the sound and falls asleep. It's a very interesting thing. That's how we put in roots and long for the place that we were rooted first. Shobita Jain writes that micropolitics and social practices of transnational operates within sphere of marriage. So irrespective of the fact that people have migrated from diasporas, yet the concept of marriage, family, and kinship remains. Despite the bounded nation state, distances, scattering, family translocation ties through marriage do remain intact. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we were studying how South Africans, in spite of the fact that they have been there in South Africa, Indians in South Africa, over generations, they still tend to look at the Indian matrimonial websites and want to marry Indians. The practice and politics of this continuity helps transnationality to be fluid because there is something known. Human beings like to have that known thing. In closed-in families, it's challenging for transnational families to be intact. Yet, even with migration, they make an effort to keep the binding. And now, with modern media like peer-to-peer messaging, with internet, social media, that binding or keeping in contact can be maintained, which was very difficult earlier when possibly the indentured laborers were taken. There was no way to connect back. And that longing used to be there, but no way to connect back. When four members of the family live in two or three nation states, they shape split transnational household family, share strength from shared imaginary of belonging, which happens through marriage across a particular time. And that's what the interesting thing happened for for non-resident Indians or diasporas which moved to the US in the 60s and 70s, when their idea of India still happens to be of the Indias of the 60s and 70s, whereas India in the 2024 is so much different from the 60s and 70s. And that's why they get through a cultural shock. They still expect some things of the 60s, whereas India has moved. The established idea that countries like America are a land of opportunity dwells in the imagination of the middle class family even today. The passing of the Immigration Act 65, it set the stage for Indian diaspora. Till 1990, the previous settled migrants had encouraged and financed migration through. And that's how diasporas happened. There was the pre-independence people who moved, very few of them. The 60s and 70s saw engineers, doctors, very high-skilled people move to America because there not enough opportunities in India. And then post 90s, the economic liberalization got a lot of, and that's when IT boomed, and then the knowledge of English helped Indians, migrate. Stories circulate about poor cousins who went to the US or UK and made a fortune, paved way for connecting with transnational migration. Migrants via marriage also looks at ways to stay connected with native land and the culture where marriage becomes a very significant way to connect back.
Sir, I have one point regarding marriage. Now, this is regarding the inclination of the choice of marriage. For example, whether people like to marry from the home country or the host country or third country. For example, if someone is there in US, settled in US, now he want to get married. He has three options. One, he can marry from India if he is from India. So in this case, the root with the India are strengthened. Okay, he will be coming very often, all those things. In case he marries the host country nation, then his relation with the USA increases. He is more integrated. And in case he marries to the third country, for example, Chinese or Russian, whatever, then in case something else happens. So what do you feel, number one, what is the inclination and what it is effect with respect to his relation with the home country?
So, Manish, I'll just come to that. In fact, a couple of slides later, there has been a study done in terms of how the marriages happen. Just wait for a minute. I'll just come to that slide. Then we'll talk about it. Okay?
Okay, sir.
Margaret Abraham, in a work, categorized a term called model. So then there was this concept of a model minority, and Indians tried hard to come to this, model minority syndrome. And that also had some basis, historical basis to it. Till 70s, the Indian diaspora, highly skilled professional, governed by colonization. Listen, at the end of the day, the human experiences and the way human forms an identity and the way human perceives about himself or herself and likes to project is shaped by multiple considerations. As I was talking in the last unit, there is never a deterministic way of change. There are multiple factors how changes happen. More often than not, media, when it brings out a story on a particular change, likes to keep a stereotypical way or a reductionist way to explain things. For example, technology will change everything. Digital will make transparency. It doesn't work that way because when human beings are a complex entity, people do not understand in a very simplistic way. There are multiple factors at work. So colonization of the native land also had a role to play The Indian diaspora also had racial stereotypes against Indians in America used to consider themselves superior to African Americans. There was a racial component to it. They tried to differentiate themselves as hardworking and cultured. Again, colonization effect. Practice their kind of avoidance strategies towards the other minority groups they thought to be relatively unsuccessful. This idea of model minority has made tendency, and inevitably, when you're trying to focus on a particular thing, a lot of other things gets missed out. For example, concealed facts like domestic violence, poverty, homosexuality, HIV/AIDS, drug abuse to maintain a good image. However, migrant organizations like South Asian Women Organization challenge this perception. So Indians did try a lot to project themselves as a model minority. Remember, human beings are never homogeneous, communities are never homogeneous, countries are never homogeneous, religions are never homogeneous, nothing is homogeneous. All of us are different when we look at it. But this was also a criteria. Unlike the societies in the West, marriage in India is attached to more of a collective interest rather than individual interest. Though in politics, if you see the world politics, marriages was a way to enhance politics, where two business families, where if you look at US, there are a very select few families which have governed US since independence. So everywhere, also understand marriage is a kinship way of enhancing a network. Therefore, the family's participation in choosing marriage partners in starting one's house has a crucial play. And that's why possibly over a period of time, the Oriental system and the Indian system had this, the example which is given is the parents know better for the child. When parents select a match, it is always looking at very much consideration. You are basically infantilizing the boy or the girl who is looking for a partner for themselves. But it's actually not the case. There are larger considerations because that's how the culture is. There is a family's participation. It's a collective interest rather than an individual interest. When they settle in places outside the country, marriage to own becomes central in preserving the social cultural identity. So inevitably, there is this thing about preserving, and it's not in India. You will see a lot of other communities also trying that. Within Indian community, both in India and abroad, is attached to belief like respect, sacrifice, honor, and shame. Very much an Oriental characteristic. The interest of the family and tradition has to be placed before an individual's choice. And that's how the mainstream media, like movies, bring out the same concept of in terms of respect, in terms of sacrifice. You'll see a lot of movies talk about sacrifice, honor, shame. They will use those words. And that's how the socialization happens. Such value system make them different from dominant Western counterpart as well as from the minorities, guarding them against immoral values of the West. We've heard this also a lot of times about immoral and moral. Who is deciding that? Inevitably, there is a set of politics which comes in play, and there are other factors which come in play. Indian women in the US are a markers of their cultural continuity. Therefore, in the West, they're not only responsible for maintaining their family honor, but the honor of the Indian society. Indians take pride in the lower divorce rates among community as a sign of strong values, commitment to families. Again, that model minority concept. So that's how it is. These are things which have come out of various studies. This is a part of your self-learning module. So I'm highlighting some part of it. Whether it's right or wrong, let's not go into that. That's the way it is. So, for example, Manish Margaret Abraham identifies the following types of marriage of Indian diasporic community. Transnational arranged marriages, grooms seek brides from India. Arranged marriages, bride seeks groom from India. Love marriage among transnationals of Indian migrants. Arranged marriage among, so they, in spite of going outside, there is still the concept of arranged marriage and interracial marriages in the host country. All of them are happening simultaneously. And there's nothing right or wrong. It's how the family or the extended kinship looks at the marriage scenario. In
Sir,
arranged
you said interracial marriage. So in that,
yes.
what you mean by racial? Like African race, Asian, European, how you decide?
So interracial could be either between an Indian and an African descent person, between an Indian and an Caucasian person, between an Indian and an Oceanic person, or an indigenous person, or an Indian and an other Asian person. Because typically, remember in the West, US and Europe, Indians are South Asians. They are not Asians. Asians are typically Chinese, Japanese, Philippines, Vietnamese. They are not Asians. So interracial could be any one of these. Manish?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Okay.
Even like say people say Aryan race. So do you consider that also?
So Aryan is a different concept altogether. In fact, a whole lot of Aryan, what we read in history about Aryan invasion.
But now it doesn't hold, I guess.
Correct. Aryan thing has been debunked. So let's not go into those. There are a lot of political concepts which get, diffused into a lot of subjects. Let's not look at that. Let's look at as it is, whatever research has been done. I'm presenting out that, and then maybe we can discuss it at the end of the class. Manish, let's go forward to see how this migration, marriage, and violence works. So in arranged marriage, when men look for a wife from India, travel back to India to find a bride, and we see that a lot of happening. During the Christmas New Year season, a lot of men travel because West is closed. They travel. The reason for doing so is because women raised in India will be more domesticated and less sexually promiscuous than Indian diasporic women. Sexuality is related to morality, in short, with a strong idea of Indian values, and hence wants the wife to be docile and passive. We see that a lot in Indian men in India, especially coming from high tech or highly educated. They also, the interesting part is, look, a very interesting way a research would be to read the matrimonials as to how do they describe as the brides that they want to look at, men look at, or their parents want to look at it, or how the brides are wanting to describe the grooms they are looking at. The men come for short visits, so the matchmaking process is done at the earliest. So inevitably, there's a kinship involved. There's a whole extended family which is looking out for girls because the guys are coming. A lot of this, in fact, in Punjab, for example, a state, there are all these NRI brides where the guys come, marry these girls, and then abandon them. Some time back, there was a lot of news which used to come out about these abandoned brides. I have not seen too much of such news, but in Punjab, there was a major problem. She argues that while both men and women say no, but usually the women are under family pressure to say yes. But that's not as simple as that. We will see further as to why it's not simple. Because obviously the women also have agency. Sometimes their aspiration to settle abroad motivates her judgment. So the women do have an agency in spite of the parental pressure. Such a short period of interaction often leads to a marital abuse later. These structure, and it does not mean it will definitely lead to marital abuse. There are enough case studies where it is not. So remember, as I keep saying, it is not a homogeneous thing. But when Margaret had studied this thing in terms of migration, marriage, and violence, she did find out this abuse. These structural and cultural marriages can add to marital abuse, where women who are even for green card holders, cases that men want to hold a green card and use the women as a ladder. So it works both ways. Remember, identity works in a way which is beneficial to the individual. The husbands who migrate from India carry the notion of male domination, which they want to impose on their wife. In fact, we had seen a case study in one of the units much earlier when these girls from Kerala who didn't even know English went to Germany for caregiving. Subsequently, later, a lot of them got married with Keralite men, and the men decided to accompany these women back to Germany. But once they went out there, they felt emasculated because now you had the women working and the society was much different. There was a lot of case of marital abuse. In fact, many cases where the men killed their wives because of, emasculation. A lot of men did adjust, So all kinds of situations come in. But the fact is, when these cultural changes happen, there's a lot of adjustment that needs to be done. It's not a very simple thing. The patrilineal notion that the husband should be provider and wife the caregiver is altered after men migrate as transnational husband, diminishes the status of these men in the eyes. And also remember, parallelly, the status of these men in the community back home. And now, with this 24/7 media, it becomes all the more problematic. What do you do? So, you are eating out of your wife's salary is a very emasculating thing. Transnational husbands therefore often take to violence to assert their masculinity and superiority over their wives. So all these things kind of happen. This is what the study found out. Vulnerability is more on the part of the women who migrate as spouses, obviously because now you're going in a different place. In the US, the spouse of US citizen can come as lawful permanent residents, which gave enough power to the husbands. Violence towards wife can be a form of physical, sexual, or mental. Undergo one of the most severe forms of emotional abuse as isolation, because you are going into an absolutely different culture. There are different expectations, there are different norms, and assuming the fact it's an educated woman who goes and wants to do a job, there is a different obligation which comes in, a different pressure which comes in. And remember, in the West, the kind of help, domestic help, which we get out here in India, they do not get it, and the pressures of living are much more. She's far away from the family, without any friends or support. Abusers take this as an opportunity to inflict violence, economically harassed, emotionally threatened. Cases where wives are locked inside the houses and thrown away from houses to be on their own without any fight. In fact, with this, a lot of these Punjabi wives were abandoned after they were taken to the West. There were a lot of case studies which happened some time back. Again, as I said, over the last many years, I have not seen many stories which were coming out, but there was a whole organization in Punjab and Chandigarh which was there to fight legal cases for these women who were abandoned. Social networks have a crucial role to play in fostering and settling down. What typically happens when migrants, when people move from one particular village or one particular area in the country, they more often than not call other people from the same area, and when the people migrate, it becomes easier for them to acculturalize in patrilocal families. This kind, especially for wife givers, creates a chain of network. So in a lot of cases, when the wives marry these NRI grooms and go abroad, then the wife, it becomes a gate for the wife's families also to migrate, because now there is somebody known to them. The transnational family to whom the girl is married can help foster more migration from families. There have been cases of Australia where the guy marries this girl from Australia, and then the girl family sponsors the guy to Australia. We'll see that in future, in the coming slides. And that happens. In a lot of cases, the marriage basically happens so that the boy can be facilitated to migrate. The practice of caste endogamy and territorial exogamy widens the perspective of partners for marriage, which are often governed by long-term interests. So there is an interest for the family at play. Marriage alliance cannot act as a strategy to open up, can act as a strategy to open up new routes of migration, not only from India, but also among different Indian diasporic communities. We have looked at in earlier units about how identity is changed according to benefits. There's nothing wrong about it. That's the way it happens. And it's not just Indians across the world. Various communities do that. Just a second. Sorry. Somebody came in the household. Can act as strangely as a new routes of migration. Scholars like Graf cite cases where patrilineal societies like Punjab, idea of locality is made flexible to open new migration routes. narrates stories of men who decided to marry and move to Australia to live with the wife's family. These men decide to do so. And you see how the cultures accommodate, how the basic normative principles also accommodate to these new situations. And you will see families justifying these new situations. Husbands settled in Australia would help foster migration for their younger siblings back home. There is a work of convenience. So every time somebody makes the statement, okay, this happens only like this, is absolutely incorrect, because every culture, even the caste system, even the religious norms have this flexibility of accommodation, and people use this flexibility to, for whatever advantages they see. Indian maintains kinship relations come naturally even without material gain. Therefore, even if Indians have overseas skills, and the oceans and distances are hardly a barrier to maintain these ties, which becomes easier today with the media, with internet, chosen from transnational, with high income and prestige. It becomes a social capital for upward movement. It's looked at as a social capital for upward movement. Patrician Oberoi Rajni gave an example of Tamil Brahmins who seek to enhance their social capital, economic improvement, marriages of their children with spouses studying abroad, mostly in North America. American Varan or the American Boom marriage alliances. It happens in various communities. Bride is expected to be fair, which is what is required in the Indian matrimonials also. Beautiful, educated, as well as domesticated, enough to understand the meaning of associating with their tradition.
Sir, I like this word upward mobility that you have stated. So
Yes.
now you are talking about marriage a tool of upward mobility in the case of migration and diaspora.
Yes.
What about in the domestic? It is used domestically also?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Remember, the way the caste system functions, the guys cannot marry in a lower caste, but the girls can marry in the upper caste, which is an upward mobility for the family. Manish, if you're interested, read a little bit more about the sociological understanding of the caste system, the way caste system functions. And there are a major amount of flexibility. In fact, a big Indian sociologist called M.N. Srinivasan brought in two terms, one thing called Sanskritization, where the lower caste pick up rituals and various Sanskritization modes to improve their caste status, upward mobility, or B, they start picking up Western customs and rituals. The concept of birthday celebration. You go to Indian rural areas today, they have birthday celebrations, they have washing machines. It's a sign of upward mobility. The mobility is happening all the time. And inevitably, everybody is trying to improve the lot. The aspiration model works very well across the world.
So about woman, I see very clearly that yes, a girl want to marry to higher class to live. And what about the male? If a lower caste male is there, then what?
So more often than not, the lower caste male has to see again. The lower itself is very structured in terms of a hierarchy. What is the lower and what is the lowest? Among the lower caste, also there are castes which are hierarchical. So you can only marry. The guys are always, the rules are the guys marry with the girl see, more often than not, the girl will marry in an upper caste, whereas the boy has to either have the same caste or marry, cannot marry upper caste. So it will be more often
the
than
girl will take the caste of the boy.
Absolutely,
based on this phenomenon.
absolutely. More often than the boy will marry in the same caste unless he gets a girl in the upper caste, which again will lead to tensions. Unless the boy is marrying this girl either in the same caste, lower caste, or upper caste, if she's a green card holder somewhere, then it's an upward mobility. Going abroad is an upward mobility.
Very interesting, very interesting. So what you are saying, as far as the domestic scenario is there, for a higher caste girl, I mean, it is not attractive to marry a lower caste girl. But if like say boys is there in USA, he holds green card, then it may she may find some attraction in that?
So obviously, see, the going abroad, marrying abroad is looked at as status upward mobility. Whereas in the Indian system, in the local system, the way the marriage happens is the girl can marry in a higher caste, but the boy cannot marry in a lower caste. Manish?
Yeah, I got the sum. Yeah.
Otherwise, you see very often you'll hear these stories about honor killing or the fact, because more often than not, the caste marriage is always endogamous. In the sense you are supposed to marry within the same caste. More often than not. So more often than not, if you are marrying, and that's why the term intercaste marriage is there. Because it is not a norm. That's why people make it a point to say, Acha, intercaste marriage hai. Is it? Oh, it's an intercaste marriage. More often than not, everybody, the whole system is disrupted if there is an intercaste marriage. The caste is a very endogamous unit of marriage. Manish, aage chalte hain. Let me just finish, then we'll talk about it further. It becomes very interesting. As I said, marriage is a very interesting phenomenon. Graph talks about how NRIs from Karnataka are investing in Bangalore, high-tech industries, real estate, not in simple business transactions, economic transactions, flows in the form of gift, and remuneration for families that are left behind. Families in India would look tech. So these couples would go abroad, and then they will send money to take care of their parents, take care of their children, and that's how it works. Women are now understand the fact that women are not just a passive member. No human being is passive. There is an old saying which says that if you do not take a decision, you are taking a decision not to take a decision. So everybody is taking a decision. There is an agency in a human being. No human being is without an agency. Women are not just passive recipients within NRI, equal participants. Most instances are looking from escape from confinement to traditional and look for a new life aspiration. Therefore, marital women's migration cannot be just looked as dependent or decide. They are looking at a consideration. It could be an upward mobility. It could be to move away from the traditional, the way societies or communities work in India. Political economy associated with the marriage migration has gained seldom attention, both in academy and public policy. Gender is also rarely paid attention to in the acculturation process. In fact, the whole process of feminization of migration has got a lot of scholars to look at migration from the female point of view as to how, because the way the women experiences migration is very different from the way a male sees migration. And that's why, coming back, when a female migrates from her home to a host, basically an in-law house, who is studying that migration? How is that a cultural process happens? Is she integrating her culture? How is her longing to her home comes in, and so on and so forth. Cultural groups are often regarded as homogeneous, whereas women's narratives get included within men's narrative, which is not correct. Reasons for that marriage migration of women is only relegated to a phenomenon of wives, which is not the case because they are individuals, they are human beings. In the book Marriage and Migration in India, Gender Issues argued that ignorance in the political economy is because household work done by the women is still not considered as a work. And that is why all these decisions, and that is why if you see there is a lot of tumult, a disquiet in the whole institution of marriage and the whole institution of family, which is being experienced in India, because a whole lot of stuff is happening. Families have contested this view for a long and argue that one cannot make a difference between marriage migration of women and labor migration. It is because both in the home as well as host country, primary responsibility of childcare and household work is confined to the women. Despite structural inequality, women possesses the ability to create a web of social. They have a separate web of social relationships, both within the host and home country. Multi-sited women have the ability to maintain a close relationship at a distance. And women work, the way women work is totally different from the way men work. That's how they complement each other, supplement each other. Okay, summing up. I think we are very much on time. Okay. Marriage migration and kinship are interrelated when it comes to Indian diaspora, physical migration. Diaspora also encompasses phenomena where community along with people carries tradition. People get rooted to another place but longing for the native land, which happens all the time. And there are some references. Abraham Margaret, it's in the Indian Journal of Gender Studies. There is Sunil Bhatia, Desh Pradesh. A whole lot of references are there in your self-learning module, which you can see. In case you have not got it, please contact Sada sir to find out when it is coming. But let me also tell you, all your self-learning modules are available in PDF forms online on eGyan and other areas. So you can always download it, even if you have not got your modules. So let me stop it here, put on my video and say hi to you. Hi, guys. Yes, Manish. Any other question now? Manish, where is Manish? Oh, there you are. Manish, any other question? In fact, if you get interested and you are willing to read more about it, it's a very interesting read to read a little bit about caste system. And how to read about sociology a little bit about how religion is identified, or how the concept of religion came about, how hierarchical models like caste came about, how the institution of marriage, how the families came about. Sociology is an extremely interesting discipline. How they worked about and how things change because of media. Remember, media becomes a place for mobilization. Media is a place where new cultural movements happen. They are a place for cultural formations. And today, it becomes all the more interesting because we have real-time media. Everything happens in real time. Any questions, guys?
Okay, sir, very interesting. And,
so what your question was that how is this happening? So again, look at the fact that the first generation Indians, let's say in the US, are still firmly rooted in the Indian tradition. Okay, this is expected out of women, this is expected out of man. The second generation Indians who have been born and brought up in the American system are now those confused, Indians. They are Indian Americans. They are confused because their expectation, their parents' expectation from them is for them to be Indians, but they have grown up in the American culture and the American system, and they don't want to stand out in the American system to be like Indians. They want to be like Americans. But when they come home, they have the Indian expectations. When they are going out, they have the American expectation. So they can date, but please try and marry an Indian. And then inevitably you yourself, tend to stand out with this confused double identity. And then the parents put, remember that movie, Shah Rukh Khan in London? What was that famous movie? Kajol and Shah Rukh Khan?
yeah, Dil Wale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge.
Dil Wale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge. So London, the bride's father wants a boy from Punjab. Expectation is the same. The girl can go out and have fun, but the marriage has to be done what the father chooses, with mother having very limited role. That's a little, stereotypical, very strong one-sided view. I am sure there are much more negotiations which are happening. But then again, the fact is, it plays one sort of a reality which is actually happening, where one generation is rooted to the earlier India. India itself has changed. The new generation, so possibly the third, the fourth, or the fifth generation might actually break out from this, this traditional Indianness to be able to get some new culture.
This is what I was going to discuss about. So my question was that as well the first generation migrant, I guess he or she will like to get married from the home country, right? But later on, as we go from second generation onward, I think they will like to get married in the host country only. Am I right?
Manish, now that's where the problem comes. The problem is because your kin group that you are socializing with is trying to push the Indian value system onto you, where your parents know the best and arranged and caste and so on and so forth. And you are stuck between the American expectation of individualism, American culture, falling in love, and so on and so forth. Otherwise, think about the fact why in the West would parents want to arrange a marriage when it's not the norm? So it's not as simple as the second generation. So inevitably, remember, as the generations progress, some part of the cultural corruption happens. The purity of the culture gets corrupted into amalgamation with the host country's culture. So it will take a couple of generations. Otherwise, look at South Africa. What we gave an example of South Africa, where I possibly the second or the third generation of Indians are there. They still are looking at the Indian matrimonials websites to try and arrange a match. Because somewhere down the line, that Indian culture and our culture being better and the amoral way. See, there is nothing moral, amoral about any culture. Every culture has its good and bad. But how we define that, how we want to transmit that, is how the families work it out. And then don't forget, it's not just the family, it's the kinship group. The chacha, the mama, the tau, and the taya, and this particular wo kya kahenge and ye kya kahenge and this and that. Manish?
Yeah, that is true.
So it's the same way what is working between the metropolitan areas and the villages.
But if you took the case of Africa, there's a third generation. For still they are looking at India.
Huh.
In that case, the host country, choices may not be good. I mean,
Need not be.
they
See,
will not
it
like
is,
to marry a black girl.
Manish, it may not be a good and a bad characteristic. It may be just like, that racial superiority of one race being better than another race was a political narrative of, the Europeans to colonize the world. Subsequent research has debunked the whole concept of races being different. It is just the skin color which is different. But the races remain the same. In spite of religions, people remain the same. The biological functions remain the same. Human societies and communities, basically, it's a political way they maintain those hierarchies. So it again depends on families. It depends on what is the family norms, family hierarchies, what is the kinship groups, what is the kind of leeway families gives to youngsters in the family. It becomes case to case. There is no generative rule. Manish?
Yeah, agreed.
Sir, my submission, sir.
Yes, Gurpreet, please.
Sir, for Punjab, the first generations in USA and Canada, the parents are happy if their children marry in the same caste.
Okay.
And on the other side, some of the cultural events of the Western culture are being introduced in those marriages. For example, destination marriages,
Okay.
and then, sir, pre-wedding shoot,
Correct.
then high-cost marriages. So
Correct.
this is also one of the aspects.
Correct. So that's a certain amount of acculturalization which happens. But more often than not, one of the reasons, Manish, why families would look at marrying within the caste or within the same culture is the fact that adjustment, they feel the adjustment becomes simple. Because it's something like this. For example,
That is the inherent reason why people like to get married.
Absolutely.
Without knowing, without someone say that this may be bad or something, but the inherent reason is what you said just now. In that case, that they don't have to adjust too much.
Absolutely.
Language, practices, religion.
Absolutely. Manish, it's the same thing. Why a lawyer would like to get his child to be a lawyer, a engineer would like to get his child to be an engineer, a doctor, because it's comforting, because I know it is comforting. So, and more often than not, we do not want too much of disruption in our lives. We like a sense of comfort. We like, something which is familiar to us. That concept of well settled what we keep saying to each other, my children are well settled, is basically I'm comfortable, everything is on an even keel. But we have seen historically in times of human stories, there is nothing called well settled or comfort. Everything is changing all the time. And all the caste system, the religion, everything has a leeway within the Indian system as well as the world system to have these kind of movements which are happening, vertical movements and horizontal movements. Everywhere it is happening. If you study a little more, you will find that everything is moving. The caste system is changing. People are doing this upward mobility, parallel mobility. One of the ways they do this mobility of marrying outside of non-resident Indians to get the status upwardness. So all these things are happening parallelly, Manish.
That's true. That's true.
And as just Gurpreet give an example of how the Western aspects of culture have come in the Punjabi marriages. Yes, of course, Sikhism, for example, has been the most egalitarian religion, and yet it practices, hierarchies. There are various things which are happening. Gurpreet, interestingly, even in down south, where the marriages were much simpler than the North Punjabi marriages, uh, there also there is an ostentation in terms of money spent, in terms of the way 10 things that, so all these things are cultures are dwelling out of each other, and everybody is looking at a way to announce their presence in terms of a mobility and upward mobility.
Right, sir. Right.
Any other question?
Sir, we mostly discuss about migration from a lower, and lowering not lower could be very economic attractiveness and other thing, to higher, like India to USA, Africa to USA, India
Okay.
to.
Okay.
Can you also talk about the migration from the higher economic or social condition to lower? What could be the situation?
Manish, migrations, see, this thing that you're talking about, from a global south to a global north, or from an underdeveloped country to a developed country, is what the media would like us to believe. But migration is happening all the time. And, because you were not there when we were doing the European diaspora, migration are happening, for example, from states like Germany, France, UK into Italy, Greece. Or, for example,
Just a minute, just a minute. From, say, you said Germany to Italy and Greece.
Italy and Greece, because again, the way Greece, in Europe, the economical status in terms of cost of living, Germany, UK, France would be higher than Italy and Greece. Or, for example, Europeans migrating to Latin America. Or, for example, Europeans migrating to third world countries like India, Thailand, Nepal. I've come across Brits who have migrated to Nepal, because if you look at the exchange rate, between American dollar and Indian rupee, a person who would be poor in America would lead a very comfortable life in India, considering the conversion rate. And people are migrating all the time.
It is happening, this kind of migration?
Yes, Manish, listen, it is very, what we say, sexy to talk about.
We can call it, what do I call it? Retirement migration, can we call it?
It is a migration. See, you can give it any names. Think about the fact, Manish, very interesting thing. When foreigners come to India, they are called expats. When Indians go to US, they are called migrants. Why? Both are migrating. Why are they called expat? Because that name is popularized by the Western media to tell them that they are political, or they are on a hierarchical higher plane than the Indians migrating to US. They both are migrating for work or otherwise. And people are migrating. And today's, with globalization, migration is happening all the place. So US engineers coming, German engineers coming to stay in India for a long period of time. Journalists coming to cover Indian elections are migrants. Why are they not called migrants? Because the Western media puts out this expats tag. So these are various tags. Let's not look at this. Understand one thing very clearly. The history or the story of human history and the story of human being is a story of continuous movement. You will find movement all the time, everywhere. People will migrate for a better deal. That better deal can be real or can be perceived. I can feel that this is a better deal, and that's why I'll go for it. It may not be, but I perceive it. Aspiration is a perceived quality. I might perceive myself to be victimized. I may or may not be victimized. So everything, people move, and people move always for a better deal, real or perceived, for an aspirational change, real or perceived. People, if they feel that US is a land of opportunity, even though they will stay in a ghetto out there, 10 people in a room with no help, they might perceive themselves to be better and they will migrate. Canada today is one of the largest Sikh population outside India. 2.1% of Canadian population is Sikhs from Punjab. The largest Sikh population outside Punjab. And in fact, there was a study which was done by Punjab Agriculture University, which says that the average Punjabi, the whole of Punjab, the whole Punjab community is under a debt of 10,800 crore for getting people to migrate to Canada and US. So migration is a constant. So work with this. Migration is a constant. People always migrate. It's not just people are migrating from north to south. They are also migrating from. They just don't migrate from south to north. They are migrating from north to south.
In fact, Canada, as you said, it is a very interesting example how the migrant can change the foreign country policy of a host country. In the whole world, this is the most striking example. Canada.
No, Manish, US, if you see, Indians are very strongly influencing the US politics today. Kamala Harris is an Indian American. She's the Vice President of America. It's a very strong community. Indians are the largest diaspora community in the world. We are not only the largest diaspora community, we are the largest diaspora community sending remittance to India. So we are doing this changing. So that is why, please understand, migrants are everywhere. All communities are migrating. India and China being the largest two countries in terms of population, obviously will have a very large migration scene which will happen. So this is don't go by even UK also, absolutely. So don't go by the media narrative, because media narratives could have a political agenda, because they work on a political economy, plus a lot of Western ideas get carried by the media, including Indian media. If we were to do, if you look at scholarly pursuits and various research, you will find out that everything is happening.
Also, this Manish was asking from higher economy to lower economy. I think during colonial time it happened. British, all these colonial rulers, they came to lower economy that time.
No, but actually, Sada, at that time when the Britishers and the French colonized, India and China were the biggest economies. They actually traveled from lower economies to higher economies. Britain was a very poor country at that time, and they basically started coming to the east to get the wealth of, because the spice trade was basically what the motivation was.
Yes, I understood, but from higher to lower it is happening, especially in the Southeast Asia, like Indonesia and Malaysia. Malaysia, they have colonies like villages for Japanese. After retirement, they come and they spend some millions of rupees, and till their deaths, they are here.
And Manish, you'll be surprised to know, if you go to Himachal, there are a couple of places in Himachal which are totally colonized by Israeli Jews.
Oh, yeah. I'm surprised, yeah.
So so much so that even the shops' name are in Hebrew.
And what is the reason for choosing to go to Himachal?
Because, see, as I said, India, countries in the global south, if you look at the conversion rate, are very easy to live by. The quality of life is much better. You have all the help. So there might be some guys who would have come and, for example, there was this guy, I think Rajesh or somebody who was doing this thing about how these people came to, in Maharashtra, a place they came and some people come, they find it good, then other people come. That's how migration typically happens.
Yes,
So this
Abhay,
might
huh. Oh, Manish saying something.
no, sir, you say, sir. First.
No, I was talking about, colonial phase. See, there is the first phase where Britons and all of they are not very rich, but close to 19th means 20th century. You can say Britain was already rich, India was poor, and the Indians were going because of, unemployment, caste issue and all. So that is the phase I'm talking. That time many Britons used to come to India, though they are in better economy.
Correct. And they settled out here. Tom Alter is one. He was Anglo-Indian, of course. Okay. Any other question? We have already shot.
Yes, I came towards end, but I think very interesting. So
this is what I was telling them, that marriage, family, and kinship is a very hardcore sociological topic, but a very interesting topic. And if you read a little bit about it, you will find there is so much of masala in this particular topic, how it functions, how this upward movement and downward movement happens, and with diasporas coming in, and now with this 24/7 media, it becomes a very interesting case study. So what we will do is we'll close now. Next week, we are doing social stratification, another interesting area. We are looking at these topics on sociology also, especially because, as I said, diaspora and migration studies is a great interdisciplinary subject. And when we look at it from different angles, we tend to understand things a little more in various perspectives rather than looking at it from, they are migrating from a lower economy to a higher economy. Doesn't work that way. There are many more factors which come into it. It's not as deterministic as saying it with one factor. So you guys have a great Sunday ahead, including the part of Saturday. Have a wonderful week ahead. And we'll see each other next Saturday at 3 o'clock.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye then. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Bye, sir. Thank you.
Okay.